Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Corner. I am joined this morning by Kyle, the definition of definition Holman.
Doing this.
We are doing this.
He's doing this.
I am not as good at it, but Kyle, the definition of definition Kyle, the dictionary, the the Advil, the cuts, the Band-Aid, the man himself, Kyle Holman. I am glad that he's here today, and for the first time, ya bear, ya boy, the man with the claws, the man who sets guitar frets on fire with his fingers, the man with more styles for all the miles, your man, Kenny Davies. Oh, I need to get like one of those sound bar things that those little like sound things that give like the clapping and the cheering and like those little things. Oh, but good morning. I'm Mike Anderson. I don't know. I don't think these guys want to do a silly intro for me, but Kyle, I am a little too boring for Kyle to think of anything. So, Mike the Dad Anderson.
There we go. Mike Lincoln and Liberty's dad, Anderson.
Mike Lincoln and Liberty's dad, Samantha's husband. What was your first name again? um, but good morning, gentlemen. I am excited to do this. This is the first time that I have ever done a three-way coffee corner. So I'm excited for this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're gonna just explore this and see how today goes, and what there is to go or to learn from it and all that type of stuff. But first, how are you guys doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah. Any plans or anything for this weekend?
My friend told me about this like BMX track that's like in the middle of a canyon that these people made, so I might try and find that with him today. So
All right. You got a bike, friend?
yeah.
Yeah. You do any cool tricks?
No.
Uh,
I can hit a jump. That's it.
Dude, when I was younger, like way younger, there's this place by our house that had like this roll in, and it went down, and then it had like a little jump at the end. But like I wasn't strong enough to like actually get my bike to do the jump, so it just turned into like this like really awkward like pop a wheelie and then like fall forward thing because like I just wasn't strong enough riding the bike. But it's wild. Kyle, you got any plans today? You getting yourself a doggo or anything?
No, not today. But I did find out the gym's open. My gym that I go to is open again, so trying to go back to the gym. Just stay away from
Nice.
people.
Yeah. Go get yourself some nice recycled COVID air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not hanging out with you as soon as ever. As much as I love you, that sounds like a cesspool. Oh,
I'm just trying to see what it's like, but if there's a lot of people there, I'm like, nah, not gonna happen.
yeah. Oh man, can COVID come out of your sweat pores? Like that's a real question. Like if it's aerosol based, like
I don't know.
you and
I
we've all been around enough people and enough dudes and above enough young dudes to know that like if we can breathe like aerosol based and like or like aerosol and spread COVID that way, that the way that some of these young folks smell, that's they are also emitting some toxic fumes, if you know what I mean. Oh no. Oh no. Here's the next question. I shouldn't say. I could say it. This is coffee corner. Can you fart COVID?
yes. There.
Kyle's not a doctor. I think this is where we say Kyle's not a doctor. Kenny, what is your professional someday firefighter opinion on can you fart COVID?
Well, my immediate response is wondering like what two systems, like, because farting would be part of like the digestive system almost, right? Versus something like your immune system and everything else.
Kenny
So it's like
brings balance to everything, and I know like your family's gonna watch this and everything, and it's anyway. Oh, I'm laughing. Question for you guys before we get going. I've heard it said on the internet, if your mask can block it, your clothes should block the farts. So, like, you're safe unless you're running around buck naked, which you're not allowed to do. So, or you shouldn't do. So a couple things before we get started. Right, today we are talking about using the internet for God's glory, and I'm really excited for this topic. I'm really excited to get Kenny in here, someone who is a little bit younger, someone who's like grown up completely in the digital age. Kyle's also significantly younger than me, but when I was in high school, I still had to do prepaid minutes on my cell phone.
I mean, I do that now.
Never heard of that.
Things haven't changed. You'd have like a prepaid phone, and you would go to the store and you'd buy like a $10 card, and it would give you like 10, depending on when you'd call or when you would text. You know, you could maximize the amount of texting and stuff that you could get done, and it was basically charged per text. So like a $10 card could get you, 1,000 messages or something like that. So, and or like 50 minutes of phone call or something. Like it was.
I mean, I feel like that's still a thing. Like I just remember like the Verizon days of don't call till 8 because then it's free.
Yeah, I mean those are still real.
Only call people on Verizon because it's free.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Only call in network, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I do have a question for you guys. Before we get started, I've heard it said on the internet that you can tell a man's theology by how they drink their coffee. So we're not going to get too philosophical with it. That's a goofy saying. I don't even know if I fully support it. I do not. I do not. Is the answer. I don't have theology. And then the other quote or the other joke that can run around is like, when you're looking for a good church, you want the church, you want to test, how good of a church they are by how good their coffee is in the lobby.
Dang.
I don't know. I'm here, guys. I'm here.
Oh no.
I'm tired. Whatever. But how do you guys drink your coffee? Are you drinking coffee this morning?
I am not drinking coffee this morning, but normally it's either black or with like oat milk. Oat milk and coffee go well together.
Oh, you probably go. Okay, I thought you put oatmeal in your coffee, and I thought you were insane for a minute.
No, oat milk.
Dude, put oatmeal in your coffee instead of the water.
Get out of here.
That's how that happens, right?
Man,
so I got a fun story for you guys. Kyle doesn't really drink coffee unless like I offer it to him because he can't say no to free things. But Kenny, I still remember the first time that I took you to like a good coffee shop, and you were like, "Wait, this isn't the coffee that I'm used to having. This isn't Starbucks."
Right.
Wait, how do I order from a place that doesn't have pumps of caramel syrup? What do I do?
That's the thing, though. It's either like
I remember when it came time for me to order, I was just like, I'll get whatever Mike is having. And Mike looks at me like, are you sure? I was like, no.
No, I'm not sure. That's like when you go. So like when I was in Vietnam, for example. But anytime you go to a place where like the natives like definitely have eaten through the menu and know like their thing that they want, and they're like beyond like the staples, whatever. It's like if you were to take someone here, or if you were to take someone from like out of a culture that doesn't have Mexican food as prevalent, like you might not get them some of the more exotic meets or some of the more, some of the head meets or some of the maybe Autobata. You'll start them off with like, here's a California burrito, and this is daring for you to have French fries in a burrito. But no, it was good times. I've known Kyle and Kenny for a long, long time, and I'm excited to talk to them a little bit about things today. When I texted you guys a little bit with the prompt and those kinds of things, Kenny, I want to ask you this, and we'll start off here. Kenny, like, how would you describe being the most recent high school graduate of the group, of the three of us, right? How would you describe how people use, and specifically youth, but like, how would you describe people use the internet?
The biggest thing I feel like is contact, like, just keeping in contact with people, communicating with people. But then also like sharing and just getting word out for a bunch of different things. So like, it could be for news, it could be for, whatever biggest thing that just happened, I don't know, 5 hours ago in the world. It's like you'll see it on your phone within, I don't know, a couple more hours. So it's like, I don't know, news, getting things out there, and then communication, I feel like, are the biggest things.
Do you think students today are paying attention to the news? Like, how does a high schooler today, right? Pick generic high schooler who, they have three hands, or they have one hand, right? Because their other hand has their phone in it,
I feel like most of us, when I say news, I mean like just whatever thing that might be news related.
Current events.
Whether it's like, current events, or even if it's like true or not, if it's like put on an Instagram and formatted a certain way, it's like most of us will probably believe it, at least for a second, before we like Google it or figure out if it's real or not.
Meme culture. I mean, it's all like very visual and very quick, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you described, is that, there's this quickness to the availability of the things that you can receive from the internet, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to memorize things as much anymore because you can just Google it by the device in your hand, right? You don't have to, you want to talk to somebody? Well, you have a bunch of people you could text, Oh, you can't talk to somebody? We've all seen these people. The people who are bored, but their friends aren't available to talk. So they start like sharing ridiculous Instagram stories and like you know what I mean? It's like I gotta share something. Kyle, how else do you think how else would you describe people using the internet today?
I mean, the two big ones I think are like current events and communication. Like, I literally only have Facebook, so I can use Facebook Messenger. That's it.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, I'd say entertainment, like memes.
Yeah.
Like 90% memes. But like, I mean, that's really it, to be honest. I think entertainment, current events, and like news and communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's really interesting that there's a couple things that we didn't talk about, that weren't mentioned, is school, right? Like, which goes to say that like it's not the default place that students go to for school.
Yeah.
Like given all the stuff, all the online learning from high schoolers, from college students, all the way down to elementary school, the online element, the internet element of that being the place you learn in school, or you go to school, so to speak. People like, that's not what's coming to mind as we talk about this. I think that there's a lot of struggles with that, right? Because honestly, there's a lot more stuff that goes on the internet, right? And there's all sorts of stuff. Online shopping, like, like y'all know about Amazon,
Oh,
right?
okay. You were talking about the internet, like not like social media, the whole internet, huh?
Yeah. Just what are
Okay.
people? Because like I think that's because what I was trying to draw a picture of is the contrast between we might I think there is a general generational difference between the internet being used as a tool and the internet being used as a social platform.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I was getting at because I think that's important for us to understand. That's important for people uh older generations and just generations in general, like to realize that people are interacting with this thing very differently. You know, what do you guys kind of think about that as you think about like, oh man, maybe someone does use like people are using the internet differently, kind of across the board.
Absolutely. I think like depending on like what you grew up with and like what age you were when you were really introduced to the internet, I think that really affects like how you would use it and how you view it.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, my grandma would only use the internet for checking email and like banking stuff. And that was
Yeah,
it. Like she hardly ever did like anything else on the internet. Like she used technology for other things, but the internet itself was just email and banking, from what I can remember. Um, so yeah, and then like versus me using it for just about everything else. Like if we had a question about something or even just trying to figure something out, it was like, oh, let me pull out my phone and just Google it. And every time my grandma was there, she'd just be like, you can do that? Like on that, but like that small little thing, like you don't have to pull out your computer for that? It's like, no.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
I think
think
that's a
that.
big one.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
You're good.
I mean, I think it's a big one. Like the difference being younger people will like, I don't know, Google it. Like that would be the first instinct, and like in older people, that might not be the first instinct. Just oh, we don't know. Okay,
Right.
like
Well, like my grandma, like it's good that you brought up your grandma because my grandma, I think all she does is she uses it for email, and like the very few things. Whereas I think that like there's some interesting generational differences between like seeing it again kind of as this tool to access email, which would be like going out to their mailbox for a lot of folks. Uh, or maybe doing some online shopping, maybe like that kind of thing, maybe it taking the place of did you guys ever
TV.
watch like Price is Right growing up, like or any of those like early morning TV shows like type of
Yeah.
things, right? I remember like when we would have like a day off of school, it was like an honor and a privilege if we could watch The Price is Right, at 10 a.m. or whatever on a weekday. And but like what goes on around them is like there's like these like online shopping or like these on TV shopping channels and that kind of stuff. And like I think that some of that for that generation has uh moved over towards the internet, right? And I also think that then there's a generation that sees it as um like kind of what are the cool things I can do there, right? Maybe that's like our parents' generation, or oh yeah, I can do this cool thing, or like pretty proficient in Google Docs or that kind of thing. But I think there is a stark difference between those types of things and how youth are using it today, because youth are using it as their social outlet. People are using it as an outlet for to escape the physical world that they are in at that moment. And I think that that's interesting, you know? And I think that it's interesting to understand that we have a lot of different approaches to how the internet is, right? Similar to how, different parents will have different approaches towards video games, towards sports, towards, a big one, different parents have different approaches towards the sport of football for their kids. Some are like, it's too violent. Others are like, beat them up. Like, this is what'll toughen up my kid. Right? I'm talking about Kyle's parents specifically. No, just... but, it's one of those things that I think it's interesting to think about it as we approach it differently. Right? And as we approach it differently, I think there are some universal things that we can understand, but I also think that there's like dangers that we don't even know. The internet in a lot of ways is kind of like the Wild Wild West, right? Where it's like I can go and pick a fight with anybody. I can go and have an argument with anybody. I can go and not have an argument with anybody. I can go to stake out my little corner of land over here on my in my favorite Instagram chat group, or I can go and post something publicly that people will or won't agree with, and I think that we see that even more in this season of politics, in this season of COVID, in this season of more and more people practicing their strong opinions on the internet. And I think that that's kind of wild, right? Like, we see this rise of a YouTube culture, right? We see a rise of a YouTube culture for all generations. And I think that it's really interesting as we start to look at it and start to think about it. It's like, wait a second, like, the internet is one of those places where, like, we can almost do whatever we want, And that's kind of wild to me. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, of it being this almost like this unregulated gateway almost to like a whole other world and reality.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, like, aside from the big platforms like YouTube or Instagram, like, and even there, it's still pretty unregulated, but like, it's super unregulated just on the internet. Like, as opposed to what you can do, in real life. Like, you can't go out to the street corner and just start shouting random nonsense without expecting someone to try to stop you. On the internet, you kind of can. Like,
I mean, you literally can.
Yeah. Like, it's super unregulated. Like, and so that can be good or bad, I guess.
Kenny, I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of social media stuff, right? Whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. The youth aren't really into Facebook these days. That's turned into an older generation thing. But I wanted to ask you, how does one find like guidance in the internet? And what I mean is, like, what guides their interactions? Like, when you see a meme, right? Pick random political meme, random Christian meme, random just even funny meme, or meme about maybe a movie that you have or haven't seen, or whatever, right? And for those who are listening who might not know what a meme is, a meme has kind of gone a bunch of different ways over the last couple decades, but the basic idea is something funny on the internet, or something that pushes an idea or ideal on the internet. There is something different, like infographics and those kinds of things, but like, I saw a thing today. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, that's not the thing we needed. I saw a thing today where it said this. It is apparently a Mike Tyson quote, because it's a picture of Mike Tyson. All right? It's a picture of Mike Tyson, and it's a quote saying that it's Mike Tyson. But I don't know if it's real or not. And it says this: social media made y'all way too comfortable with disrespecting people and not getting punched in the face for it. Right? Like, I saw that this morning. And why do I bring that up? Because those types of things are flooded across social media, right? Whether like you'll see the Abraham Lincoln quotes, you'll see the you'll see the quotes from this political party or that political party. You'll see these memes. You'll see all these different things. And Kenny, I wanted to ask you, like, how does someone navigate that today? Like how does how are the youth responding to when they like see something and it's like, oh, okay, you know.
I feel like it's one of two things. It's like there's the people that will actually question it, and like you do, or like you said with that quote, is where you say you don't know if it's real or not right off the bat because it's one of those things on the internet. But then there's like the people that just believe it right off the bat until someone either corrects them or they figure out for themselves that it is or is not real.
Right.
And I don't know, it's one of those things that's almost dangerous in a way because it can be so influential in the sense of like if you, like I said earlier, like if you format something right and you make it look believable, like you could put just a picture of someone, and so long as it has quotation marks around it, like they just instantly assume that it was from that person,
Mm-hmm.
and people will believe it. Like it's a known thing that I've come in contact with. That's like people don't realize, and people also like hesitate to almost do the research for themselves. Like even if it is just a quick Google search, you know.
Right. I think it's. Well, I want to ask you before we go on. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people hesitate? Why do you think, youth are hesitating this to like research and actually find out, the truth behind the things that flood and inundate, their news feeds. Kyle, I'll ask you the
The
same question after Kenny goes.
the biggest thing I can think of is just because they agree with it. Like
Yeah.
whatever it might be, if it's something they like, they might be more hesitant to figure out if it's real or not versus if it's something they don't like or they're trying to be opposed to, they're going to be way more keen on figuring out, okay, what's wrong with this versus figuring out if they like it and if it's actually true because they like it or because it's actually true.
Right. What do you, Kyle? Why do you, you know, all these memes, all these different things, how do you think people are responding to this, kind of based on what you see?
I think like Kenny said, a lot of it is you kind of see it and you take it in. I think I don't know if Kenny mentioned it. I kind of heard something of it, but like if you agree with it, then you'll probably take it in. If you disagree with it, you'll be more likely to be hesitant to believe it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big one. And like uh you kind of like whatever you see, it's if it sounds believable, you'll probably just believe it and not doing a Google search. Like just kind of believe it. If it's super unbelievable, you might do Google search and then or you might just immediately reject it. But
Yeah, it's a two-way street, right?
yeah,
Because I think that one thing, I think there's two things that are big factors in all this. Is one, when you see like a meme like that, right? Like the Mike Tyson, some of you guys haven't been punched in the face meme, right? You might like, you might read that, right, and just be like, oh, okay, like that, uh, someone said that. But I think that all of these, all of these are designed with loaded language, which is a logical fallacy, by the way, for anyone. But like most of these, if not all of them, are designed with loaded language, meaning that, um, kind of in that nutshell, it's using language to elicit some sort of response, and like whether that's negative or positive, it depends on your worldview and your interaction with it. And I think that one of the things that like gets so tiring for me as you scroll through a Facebook feed or an Instagram feed and you start seeing more and more of these things, like you feel bombarded, right? Because like even if you see a meme or you see like a quote or that kind of thing on social media that you don't agree with, right? Or that like it still has an effect on you to some degree, even if it's just you have to be like, did they really say that, and then you carry on, right? Like it's kind of this. I think the other danger of the internet is that so many people can say so many things that like you can literally go down the worst type of rabbit trail, right? You can literally find anyone. You can literally find anyone saying anything about anything, like, and they put it on a website. There used to be a time when I was younger where it's like if it made it on the web, a big discussion was, well, how viable, how accurate is it, right? Like, make sure you check your resource. Make sure you, like, is, this news source, right, viable. You used to not be able to quote a .com. It had to be a .org or .gov. Like, that was like a thing you had to put in your papers. But when we are doing our research, as Christians, we see a meme and, oh, is that real? We have to be able to walk. The Bible says to walk with wisdom, to walk circumspectly, to walk looking at the whole and not just the little narrow thing, and that's an interesting thing because you'll find people who will go super far with it. And I think that's one of the weird dangers that happens is like the internet is the information superhighway, right? But it's also the disinformation superhighway. And I think that's really interesting, and it's interesting to see, and just as we kind of talk about this, that even like youths might see something and be like, well, I don't even want to look into it because that might lead down a rabbit trail that I don't want to go down. So now here they are affected by it, but not doing anything with it. And it kind of, I really do think it feeds into a lot of the polarization that we see today. And you guys are like nodding your heads, and it's like, yeah, like I feel
not much of that. Like, it's just accurate.
So we get bombarded, right? We get bombarded with different things. I'm sure we could talk about, hashtags and how to make your posts get followed, and Kenny could show us 101 tips on how to make your photos look way better. Also, if you guys need photography, Kenny is here for you. But there's all sorts of things. But I kind of want to talk about like the content, right? The content of the internet and what's going on here. What would you guys say are some good biblical guidelines to navigating the internet? I mean, the answer first is the Bible. But if you
Right.
if you just say the Bible, right? Like my question would be like, what verses?
I mean, first that comes to mind is like, whatever you do it to the glory of God.
Yeah.
Like, so make sure that can you point to that and be like, that directly glorifies God, or that will glorify God? Or is it something, if you point to it, it's like, ooh, shouldn't I, I hope no one sees that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think that's just like the first and foremost one. Aside from that, being honest, I think is a big one.
Yeah.
Specifically, like, I see it a lot where people will say something, and then when confronted about it, it's like, oh, it's a joke. I didn't mean it. I don't. It's just be honest,
Yeah.
or don't say it. I don't know. I think.
What
about you, Kenny?
Going off what Kyle said about being honest, a big part is like almost being honest with yourself. Because I feel like a big part of things is like, oh, if I'm like sharing videos with my friends and stuff, they might share like videos that are more like Christian and following God in the sense of like they don't have profane language and stuff like that around certain people, but then they might be playing other videos or even music and stuff with very profane language and other things around other people. Um, but then in their heads, they're kind of like, I've heard the argument of like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me or my walk. And it's kind of like, well, when you're doing that and you're letting those videos or what you're seeing and reading influence you to where you're only not doing it with this certain group of people versus this other group of people, then yeah, it is kind of affecting you. It's
Well, I
also
mean,
just
you're
being
always
honest,
walking, right?
right?
Like,
Yeah. So just being honest with yourself also, and like what you see and what you listen to, what you read does have an influence on you on the internet. So just like being honest with yourself.
yeah, like we don't get to pick and choose when we're walking with Christ or not, or we don't get to like take it and put it here, and then like, okay, I'm gonna go do this other stuff over here while and I'll come back to my walk later. Like, I think that that's an important thing to remember when we're talking about the internet is that if you call yourself a Christian, you're always representing Christ. Like we talk about this at Waypoint as in our leadership is like if you're a Waypoint leader, you're always representing Waypoint, right? Like it's the same thing if you pick any job, right? You're representing that job or those people or whatever every time you do anything, even if you're off the clock. Like imagine pick anyone famous, right? And then pick what they're famous for, and it's like, well, is Brad Pitt or I'm just picking a name here, but like, is Brad Pitt, like it's all of Brad Pitt, right? Brad Pitt is an actor. It's not just what he does in his movies. It's his philanthropy work, and it's his family life, and it's his like all these different things, and it's like everything that we do is related to our faith, right? And our faith should be trumping it. I honestly think when we're talking about the internet, I see it as too often, again, kind of the wild, wild west, right? It's like too often people are getting into gunfights. Too often people are getting into like these space wars, not like outer space, but like land wars, Oh yeah, well what about this? And then they like post, another website that like is clearly just an opinion piece, like and then it's being presented like it's fact, and like back and forth people are fighting, and like and I sit back and I go, wait a second, the Bible talks about this, right? Like here's some verses. John 13:35. By this all will know you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Like ask yourself when you're posting the political meme, or you're posting the even just the funny Christian meme, or whatever, right? Like ask yourself, like, is this showing love to one another? And that's talking about Christians to Christians specifically in that verse, but like we know we know that, and I'm going to read some more verses here, that it's talking about all people. We are called to love all people, right? Jesus says, Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, right? Like how often do you see people just getting riled up on the internet? All the time is the answer, right? Like every day, right? It's like, here's one, Titus 3. It's longer. I'm just going to read the verse, though. I'm just going to read the verses. Ready? Remind them, this is Paul writing to Titus, for the church that Titus was at. Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, and then here we go, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy towards all people. Right? And then he goes on to explain how we were sinners, foolish, disobedient, led astray, etc., etc. And then he goes on to say in verse 8, he says, "The saying is trustworthy, and I want to insist you on these things, so that those who believe in God may be careful to devote themselves to good works. These are excellent and profitable for people." And here we go. This is like I wonder if Paul knew the internet was coming. Ready? "But avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, dissensions, quarrels about the law, for they are unprofitable and worthless. For if a person who stirs up division, after warning him once then twice, have nothing more to do with him." Like, that's wild. We know Romans 12. Romans 12 talks about being a living sacrifice in the world, right? Holy and acceptable. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Like, when we get into internet arguments and stuff, we are being conformed to this world. That's just a fact. But then Romans 12 continues in verse 9. And again, these are the action steps forward that can guide us as we are navigating the internet. Right? "Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, but fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord." Like that's a big one to me, where it's like, wait a second. If someone went to your Facebook wall, would they know what you're all about? Right? Or if someone went onto your Instagram and looked back all through your stories, would they know that you're all about Christ? Or would they know about your, insert whatever here? If they went on mine, they would know all about my kids. Like that's a fact. But like, would it be obvious that you love Jesus, and because you love Jesus, you love others? Look, it continues. Like, these are things we should and could and should do on the internet. "Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Seek to show hospitality. Here we go, verse 14. "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly." Like the sides right now, right? Like, whether it's whatever side you're on of the racism in America, whatever side you're on of whatever, right? Masks, politics, you pick the thing, right? And when I say masks, it's obviously just, that's a representation for COVID. But like, "Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly." Well, everyone has a different definition of what the lowly is, right? But the lowly is the opposite side of you, right? "Do not be wise in your own sight." And here's the big one. "Repay no evil for evil, but give thought to what is honorable in the sight of all." Not just Christians, but in the sight of all. Not just people who share your opinions, but in the sight of all. "If possible, as far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all." Like, that's wild. Verse 21, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Man, I get fired up, right? I get fired up when I hear these types of encouragements, like, all throughout God's word. These are just some cherry picked verses that I've done. There's more. There's far more. But what do you guys think? Like, when we're navigating the internet and applying these things, like, is it hard? Like, do we what's going on?
I think the one that, like, the first one that you started off, and then when you were talking like Romans 12:9, like, loving people is an interesting one. I have a cousin who I found out is a youth pastor.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I've been paying attention to what he's been doing on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, he's like, he he gets into a lot of political, not arguments, but like he'll say his piece and have nothing more to say. And from what I was like, okay, he just says, hey, this post isn't very well thought out. Here's why. And he usually says it pretty respectfully. I was like, oh, cool. And then yesterday I noticed he said something and it was very rude. Just straight up called someone an idiot
Huh.
because they said they were voting Trump. And I was like, oh, well, that's not good. Like, that's not the right way to handle that. Um, and that's a big one, right? Like, we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, we should be, hey, when the time is right, getting in, like saying something, just saying having something to say, but not getting into a vicious argument about it. But when the time is right, if someone says they're voting for Trump, yeah, if you don't agree with that, maybe you can say something respectfully, but you don't have to. And of course, don't at all call him an idiot because that's just not right.
I
You
think
know?
that brings up a lot of examples, right? On one hand, we're not going to be perfect on the internet. We're not going to be perfect in our
Yeah.
interactions with people, right? So the rest of us who are Christians, we should be practicing giving grace, even when
Yeah.
it's our fellow Christians who are the ones causing problems,
Yeah.
right? Like, what do you think, Kenny?
No, yeah. For me, it's like scrolling through the internet. It's like, or even social media, or like, there's so much on there that's like there's two like lanes almost, that it's like you're either on one or you're on the other, and it's like us as Christians, it's hard to find that fine line between them almost, because it's like there's the people that are like, yeah, express your opinion, whatever you want, versus the people that are very much disagreeing with them and leave, rude comments or disagreeing comments. And it's like, even as a Christian, it's like you might see something that makes you want to, like, not necessarily snap back, but definitely be like disagree with it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you have to approach that with grace. And it's like keeping in mind the thought of how can I approach this with grace is a key thing, because it's like you have to realize that the people posting these, or a lot of people that post a lot of things that you might disagree with, aren't having the same mental thought of how can I approach this with grace. Like they might post something that's very controversial, but they might post it in a sense that's like, there's the people that they agree with, and then the people that don't agree with them are, idiots, or it might phrase it in a rude way towards the people that disagree with them, and that's the biggest thing I see, is like people that post something that will agree with the people or the party or whatever area that they're in, agrees with them and their friends, but then anyone that disagrees with it is an idiot or stupid, or like isn't thinking about it properly. And it's like, well, okay, you're posting an opinion, but you're posting it in a way that's implying anyone that disagrees with you is wrong. And it's like not keeping that open mindedness that you yourself could be wrong. And it's like, in a way, those kinds of posts just make things worse almost. Like you're not approaching sharing your opinion with grace. You're approaching sharing your opinion with almost like a pride and arrogance to it.
Well, I think that it's so interesting because we see this all over the internet, right? We see this everywhere where it's like, how do we speak truth, but how do we speak it in love? And I think what ends up
Right.
happening is like we can fall into grooves of either speaking truth or speaking our opinion. And then what happens is when we're not constantly going back to the source on these things, when we're not constantly referring back to God's word and like what it means, like we stop remembering to hate what's evil, right? We stop remembering to love one another with brotherly affection. We stop remembering to outdo one another in showing honor, right? We stop thinking about how can I live in harmony here? How can I be a peacemaker? How can I be someone who helps this situation? Instead, what often happens is we can get more entrenched in our thinking and in our worldview, and we see things that agree with us. Therefore, I get stronger in my belief, right? And that's the problem with the internet, is that everything shouldn't be agreed with, whether it's a conspiracy theory, whether it's a, whether it's a opinion on planting flowers. You can find, like you could find like literally anything that will have multiple sides to it, right? Like someone might say, hey, to do a garden on your patio, you should do it this way. And someone else will say, do it that way, right? You go and look up, like, how do I make pulled pork? There's going to be, like, you're going to have at your fingertips 100 different ways to do it. And that's might be hyperbolic, but it might not be, too. Like 100 would be a pretty reasonable number to me. Like,
Yeah, hyperbolic.
but, like, but the thing is we can become entrenched, right? And I think what ends up happening, and Kyle and I were talking about this actually earlier this week, is like people, when they start seeing, whether they recognize it or not, when they start seeing things they agree with, when they start, speaking up about things that they believe in, those types of things, they're engaging in like doubling down or investing further in the worldview that they've already established. Right? And it just goes deeper and deeper, and it becomes this almost like this swirl of self-fulfilling prophecy. I haven't watched the whole movie yet, but if there's a movie on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you guys have watched it yet, but it talks about how the internet, people on the internet, use your browsing history and all this type of stuff to give you more things that you like to hear. Right? Like, it's not just like an honest, I go to an encyclopedia and I go and, look up one thing. No, the internet remembers that you looked up one thing, so next time it remembers that, and then it tacks on, oh, since they looked up how to do a butt roast before, or how to do pulled pork. Sorry. Kyle. They're called pork butt. Sorry.
No, but
Okay. Like, this is how you know that I'm working with people who work with youth, because they still laugh at fart and butt and silly little words. But like, you can go, like, the internet will remember, hey, you looked up how to roast a pork shoulder. How's that, Kyle? You looked up how to roast a pork shoulder, so next time it's going to think ahead and be like, oh, you might want some barbecue sauce. You might want a barbecue sauce recipe, right? And it starts thinking ahead, and it starts spiraling and self-fulfilling what you already believe, right? So then when you start Googling, I was Googling some conspiracy theories, and I noticed that the internet, like for like me to know more about it, right? Because I hadn't heard of them. But then I noticed when I was searching other things, it was guiding me in a direction that I was like, no, I don't want to go there. I like actually don't want to go in that direction. But if you're not careful,
like,
what's up?
I'm just imagining you like Googling like Pizzagate and then going for like basketball scores, and it's like, have you heard of this crazy conspiracy about LeBron?
Yeah, you're right. LeBron's actually a cyborg.
Yeah. I mean, that's believable, but
okay. Well, yeah.
No, like, I mean, you said a lot there, and like, I kind of want to go through it, because I agree. I think there's so much to, like, especially the, like, what you were just talking about, how it suggests stuff that you've already looked at and viewed. That was something I was thinking about, like, before we were starting this. I was kind of thinking about Instagram, and like how often it is. Like, I don't know if you guys have this. I like, I like, we'll go through like a lot of Christian meme pages and stuff and just see what's out there, or not even Christian meme pages, just like Christian pages in general. And I'll find that as I'm scrolling, I'll start getting like a ton of like what other people who look at that will also look at.
Right.
And it's like almost all the time I'll end up getting like into a super like political stuff, and it's like, where did this come from? Why?
Yeah.
Like that just happens so much. And I was thinking, and like I think it's interesting because it starts to show the stuff you'll agree with, and I was like, man, that's kind of a bummer though. How cool it would be if it like showed the stuff that's just related to what you're searching in general, not what you agree with.
Yeah.
It'd be kinda nice because it also help us to learn how to deal with the dissenting opinions. But anyways,
Well, that's
um,
interesting because that goes back to the point earlier, just briefly, where Kenny was saying like students don't even want to look up the memes or anything like that because it
yeah,
just goes into a rabbit trail that's
yeah,
not worth it, you know. But you
yeah, exactly.
continue. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I kind of forgot what you were talking about in the beginning. I knew what you started off with there. Oh
Well,
man.
I was just talking about how things can spiral, things can uh we like it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and like whether we're active or passive in it,
Right.
like
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know,
Like
it starts it like it entrenches us.
the sunk cost fallacy. That's what it was.
Right.
Like, yeah. I mean, that's something I was thinking about is how it's pretty much just human nature that as you argue, if you go into an argument, you're gonna want to double down and double down and double down.
Yeah.
Like we as Christians have to go into those like not arguments, but just when we give our dissenting opinion, we have to go in being prepared to be wrong so that we can change our own opinion so that we don't become the people who just double down constantly,
Yeah.
especially if we're wrong. But at the same time, we have to go in like right knowing when the time is right. I was thinking of like an example. Matt and I, when we talk, it's not unusual that one of us, if we say something that isn't correct, we'll stop the conversation and talk about it.
Right.
Because we're both close friends and we're both the kind of people that we like to be corrected.
Yeah.
Whereas I was thinking about like if I'm talking to my mom, that's not the way to go about a conversation. If like she said something wrong, I'm like, okay, but we got to stop here now and talk about no, like who you're talking to and know what you're about to say, and also know like what how closely these people hold their beliefs, and if it's worth just saying something short on the internet that will know like if they're going to at all change or see it or care.
Well, that's a whole other thing, right? Is setting good, healthy boundaries with our interactions with people on the internet.
Yeah.
I recently, man, I had two trains of thought that I wanted to go. So I'll do this: burritos and my daughter. Okay, so we'll talk about my daughter. My daughter, like with COVID and all those types of things, I had to pay really, really close to attention, right? And I've paid over the last couple years or not couple years, but over the last while, far more attention to uh, the interaction of people on the internet in regards to people who are disabled or look different than them, or those types of things. And it's kind of interesting being the father of a daughter who's going to look very different than the three of us, and that knowing that there's a world that will make fun of her for it and those types of things. There's a part of me that I feel this burden to speak up, so I've had to practice how to navigate the internet with people. And Ephesians 5 comes to mind. Look, 5:15. Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And then it goes on to say, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And I think it's really interesting because I have these conversations with folks. My daughter's high risk. You guys know Liberty's high risk. And there was a period where I was like, I need to like express that to people, because we might not be able to imagine the other human on the other end of what we're saying on the internet. Like when you post a meme that's saying like, oh, everyone who is concerned about COVID is just living in fear. And it's like, I'm also living in light of my daughter's life, you know, like according to everything that I've been told. And I think that that's like, we have to, when we're seeing these things, we have to try to think of more perspectives. We have to try to think beyond just like, yeah, I'm not afraid of COVID, so you shouldn't either. Well, what about someone who's like immunocompromised? What about someone who's struggling with these things? What about like, and I think of all the pet arguments that Christians can have, right? One that comes to mind is Christians like to talk, or I mean, and we do regularly, but we are famously anti-abortion, right? Do we talk about all the stuff that relates to? And how do we respond to someone who maybe had an abortion and is living with that shame, right? Like when we share constantly these, anti-abortion this, anti-abortion that, but then we shrivel away when we start talking about, okay, well then how can we support a young mother, who like decided to keep the baby because your arguments for anti-abortion, but now they're literally living in poverty, like those kinds of things. How can we do this well? And what I'm not saying is like, oh, well then she would be justified in an abortion. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we have to be better thinkers, and we need to think beyond just the memes, right? We need to think beyond the implications of the memes. When we go and say everyone who's wearing a mask is living in fear and they are, they will bow down to whatever the government says, right? We're not thinking about the people who are like, well, what about the person who would die if they got a common cold? Like what about that person? Like, are they living in fear? No, they have literal, genuine concerns to be concerned about, right? And I think that that's one of the things that, like, when we're interacting on the internet, we got to be super careful. So while we're so what are you guys' kind of like thoughts on that, on like memes and solidifying your worldviews and like being careful, to like walk with wisdom throughout it all? Like, what do you guys kind of see? Like, what, like maybe we could talk more about the problem. We can talk more about the solution. We can talk about either side of this. But I think it's a healthy conversation to have when we're talking about how to love one another. But a lot of our interactions are happening through the internet, right?
Going off something that Kyle mentioned earlier was like going in with just the mentality of being wrong, or like being open-minded to being wrong, is a huge part, because I feel like as soon as there's any kind of conflict or disagreement or whatever it may be with whatever you shared, whatever you posted, people almost like, it turns into, okay, well now I'm in defense mode of whatever thing it was that I shared. Like, I need to do everything that I can to defend this statement, defend this post, this comment, like whatever it may be. And people aren't open to being wrong, it seems like, a lot of the time nowadays. And it's like, being open to being wrong is, or even being wrong is not a bad thing when it comes to like whatever, if somebody's trying to, like whatever somebody's trying to call you out on, or even like just have a discussion, like being wrong is okay, or having a different viewpoint is also okay, and you don't have to always agree. But when it becomes a defense thing, that's when it seems like it turns from a discussion into a fight.
Yeah, I think that's really difficult. I think it's really difficult to navigate because it's hard to imagine the human on the other side of the keyboard, right? And it's hard to imagine all the humans who will read the comments, and all the humans who will, see the argument, and all the humans who will do these things, like, and the damage. Like, I'm sure that all the people on my Facebook feed that called people who wear masks sheep weren't thinking of my daughter. like I'm like, as much as I hope they did, right? As much as I hope they thought of disabled people and people who are compromised, older folk, younger folk, etc. across the board, that every time they say you shouldn't live in fear because 99.x% of people don't die from this, it's like, well, like, can we talk about this in balance? Like there's got to be more to it than that. I think the other thing is, and I want to talk about burritos for a second.
Okay. Before you get into burritos, I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say, like, so I was gonna say I'm super excited to hear about what you got today, burritos.
Yeah, I love burritos.
um, I think like one that you said that like one example you touched on that's really big to me is the abortion one.
Sure.
Because like because it's a really good example of the big issue, which is not thinking about like the not just the simple issue at hand, but the repercussions of that issue and everything around it. Also, like yeah, abortion is bad, but we also like maybe ways to prevent that from like being that from having happening in the first place, right? Like how can we prevent people from having kids, like if they how can we teach about these things, right? And then how can we help to support people who have a kid that they didn't want initially, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can we maybe like improve the like foster care system? There's all these things around it that kind of get ignored with the bigger issue at hand, which is just a human life. Which, okay, not just a human life.
I was gonna say,
that's not what I intended by that. Like, I meant just as in like that's the only thing that we see.
Right.
But
like I think that there's a like I hesitate to say these things out loud, but like if we truly are, I hesitate because I understand that there are nuances to what people can and cannot do and those types of things. So please don't hear it as like any sort of condemnation or anything like that. But like, if you're anti-abortion, wouldn't it make sense that you are also pro-adoption, specifically for you and your family? Like that makes sense to me, right? Like, if you like, that's an alternative, right? And one that can be very active. And like I understand, like there's a it's a huge spectrum of arguments. Sweaty Todd in the chat says, I think that's my brother Chris, but he says there are some people who care more about the child inside the womb than outside the womb, and that's kind of that's what I'm talking about, right? And I understand abortion is a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and it's like people are making decisions about human life without them having any influence on the decision of their own life, right? Like that's a huge problem. But let's also address the other elephants in the room. And the reason why this is so important is because this is the arguments that go on the internet. That when we share the picture of the unborn baby, right, in the womb, and it's like, this is a baby, or, that type of thing, and like, we're perpetuating that. There are other people who maybe haven't gone through this thought process. There are other people who see that and say, yeah, but they're just going to commit suicide later on down the road because they're not going to have a good lifestyle, right? They're not going to have a chance. And it's like, for us as Christians, we should that should at least just cross our mind, right? It should at least say, hey, who's going to see this? And it happens on the other side too. I read this morning on Facebook. Someone said, or maybe it was last night, but someone said, look, if you aren't pro-choice, then unfriend me now. We don't have to see each other ever again. And again, this talks about the problem of the internet, where we don't have the ability to have good discourse with people. And that's problematic, right? And that's one of the things that we have to recognize. sharing whatever meme, your political meme, whatever. And this is actually a really good segue. But sharing your thoughts, your opinions, especially as they start getting away from truth, often aren't helpful. Because either you get double downed on, right? Other people might see it and say, well, I'm not in their camp, or I am in their camp. But the farther we get from truth, the more it's a problem. So we should be speakers of truth on the internet as Christians. We should be livers of truth. But I hope that by sharing some of these verses and those types of things that I talked about, it looks very different, right? Like, sharing truth, like, how does it help sharing an opinion if all it does is just entrench people? Because if your opinion is truth, you want it to be more approachable. You want it to be covered in love and grace, and you want it to be covered in, like, someone saying, wow, they think differently. I want to talk to them more, right? Rather than being, they support this candidate or whatever, right? I can't talk to them because all they do is support that candidate. Like, there's people who I'm friends with who are deeply in QAnon and deeply in the conspiracy theories and deeply in, if you divide this number by that number, look, it makes 0.666, or like all those types of things. Like, I have friends who are deeply in this, and unfortunately for me, because of how entrenched they are, like, I'm not particularly encouraged to talk to them. And these are Christian friends of mine. But I'm not particularly encouraged to go and say, hey, like, can we be reasoned by this? Whereas I think what we see in the Bible is people who are, like, we should be well reasoned, and we should be able to speak in love, and we should be able to carry forward and carry on. And I think that this goes back to something else, and I'll talk about the burrito analogy.
Finally.
Ready? You ready? Ready? We live in San Diego. We have the best Mexican food in the entire United States of America. Period. I've traveled a lot. Okay? I haven't traveled everywhere, but I've traveled a lot. And if you go to a random taco shop in San Diego, you have a higher percentage of getting good Mexican food than anywhere else that I've been to. Even LA. I still remember the time I went to LA to this famous taco shop that people were talking about, and, like, they literally didn't even have guacamole in the entire shop. That's weird, right? Like, I go down to Mexico in Tijuana, and what do they serve? Meat on a tortilla, some guacamole, and some onions and cilantro, and that's it. Right? Like, boom, they're just whipping those out. Now, here's the thing. I have friends who will swear up and down that the best Mexican food in the United States is in San Francisco. Period. Right? Like, I know you guys are like, this is wrong. And we have argued about it a lot. We have argued about it too much, probably. So then, what I've observed is every time I go to Mexico, or every time I go somewhere else, San Francisco being a place that I used to frequent a lot more, that because of how much I've argued about it, because of how much I've invested into that argument, I didn't even really appreciate the food that was in front of me, because I was sitting here comparing it to my arguments for why it's not as good as San Diego food. And this goes back to this idea of be careful. Be careful when you're arguing on the internet because of what it does to you. Right? Because the more time you invest into an argument, the more time you invest into a certain worldview, the harder it is to get out of that worldview. That is why it is so important to be invested beyond reason. I mean, not beyond reason, but like into Christ, period. Because investing into Christ allows you to change over time. It doesn't pigeonhole you. Because growing in grace, growing in love, growing in mercy, growing in truth, growing in are all things that we are called to that have depth to them. But growing into your opinion, it should change. 5 years ago, I was in a sports chat, and I would argue against LeBron nonstop. And the more I argued against LeBron, the harder it was for me to step back and appreciate how great of a player he actually is. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Laker fan. Okay? But truly, like my friends who I argued this through with, ironically the same people are the burrito San Francisco people. But but the more when LeBron came to LA, because I'm a Laker fan, they were like, well, what are you going to do? You hate LeBron. And I was like, well, thanks to you guys, my opinions have changed a little bit. And over time, I've been able to appreciate his greatness. Right?
It's one of those things that's like, when you argue against something so much, in your head, you almost you forget to, like you said, forget to actually look at the thing for what it is, because you almost build up in your own head of oh, well, I've already invested so much time and coming up with these reasons and arguments of why not to, versus actively looking for reasons to, in this case, LeBron.
Right.
So it's almost like you don't realize it, but you just store up all these oh, well, I've added too much time into this to change my opinion, or I've I don't want to admit that I'm wrong, going off of what Kyle said, going in with an open mind, or just various things like that. I feel like.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to give up something you've invested in, right? Think of the times when you've liked a girl, right? And then it didn't work out, and it's hard to give it up, right? You invested time and effort and, money and etc. It's hard to give it up. It's hard to give up something you've invested in. But that's why, and what you said was actually so wise, Kenny. Let's practice on the internet not arguing against something, but let's argue for Christ. Right? Let's do this in the positive direction. Hey, instead of saying you pro-choicers are stupid, right? We can say life matters because Christ values life. And then we start challenging ourselves in what that means, right? That life in the womb, human life in the womb, human life outside of the womb, human life in middle school, high school, beyond, geriatric life, right? There's a huge argument of whether or not we should help keep people, especially old folks, on life support and those types of things. There are people who will argue that you shouldn't, because they don't bring enough to society to value that. But the reality is that you absolutely should, because they're a human life and God says they matter. Let's talk about things in the positive, right? And as we talk about things in the positive, as we set that sight on Christ and move forward towards it, I think things become really clear as to what should fall on the wayside and what should not, right? It turns us into not single issue voters, right? It turns us into not arguers for like that get caught up in tearing people down, but instead we get caught up in building people up. I used to be that person who would just tear people down, and it's still inside of me. When I say tear people down, it would always be like the skeptic, right? It costs nothing to be a skeptic, by the way. But the person who would, yeah, but there's something else to it, right? I invested a ton of arguments into Michael Jordan, like arguments of his retirement being true or not, or whether or not he was going to be suspended, or whatever. Like instead, let's argue for something instead of argue against something, and what we argue for, let's let that be Christ, because that's where our citizenship and that's where our loyalty is. And we should do that on the internet as well. I want to segue because we talked about this for a little while, but guys, great conversation. I'm loving it. And we talked about this for a while, but I want to talk about, just right here at the end, just some of your favorite good online resources. Like honor the Lord and honor God. I will cite one that I think is super good. And one thing that's important to note is they're good for various reasons. We are all flawed humans, though, right? So there are things that can be nitpicked at. But let's not throw out all the good with some of the things that we need discernment with. Because practicing discernment would be a great skill for those of us in the internet age, right? But here's one that's been an encouragement to me for a long time, is the Bible Project. Look up the Bible Project. For those who are here listening, the Bible Project is great. They have videos that explain some pretty complex things biblically and give really great visual representations of things. They have basically Bible summaries of the entire Bible, and stories in the Bible and concepts in the Bible and those types of things. Super good. There's YouTube videos. They have a website, but that's the Bible Project. So that would be one of my first great online resources for you all. Do you guys have any more?
I just want to say Bible Project again. They're really good. They have some really good videos that really are not just explaining complex topics, but also giving great encouragement as to how we as Christians should respond to things. The one that sticks out to me the most is the one on justice. Yeah. Their video on justice is really, really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My other one, I'm sorry, Mike, this is stealing yours, but South.
No. I left it open for you, so you're gonna have to say it again because I spoke over you. But
Southside Rabbi is a really good one. That's done by a Christian rapper and one of his really close friends. They talk about just a number of topics that Christians today face that are things going on around the world, going on in this country. Or other topics as well, but they face it and they talk about it from a biblical point of view, and they and just applying good theology to it, and how they just talk through it, explain it, talk about the reactions to it, and just everything about that.
Yeah, they just released an episode yesterday, talking about basically the racial injustice or justice problem in America. And they had this quote. I'm going to read it here because it's insane. The title of the episode is Diversity Training. Diversity Training 101. But again, the name is Southside Rabbi. And it's just super good. But here's the quote. If the purpose of what you're bringing to the table is to move me away from the heart of God, you are a problem. Anyone trying to get you to tone down your care for your neighbor's suffering is doing the work of Satan. Let's call it what it is. No sinner on the planet cares for people as they should. I don't need help ignoring my neighbor's pain. I don't need help finding justification for why I don't care about my neighbor's pain. I don't need help blaming my neighbor's pain on my neighbors themselves. I need help going the opposite direction. I need help in grace. I need help in sacrifice. I need help in compassion. I need help in love, which without I will not see the kingdom of God. Again, anyone trying to give you arguments, perspectives, or testimonies that lead you to a deeper sleep about your own apathy are not helping you. They are injuring you. When they said that, I slowed the video down. I slowed the video down to half speed and started typing. I was like, I have to type this up. It's
literally
so
I'm
good.
at work. I get a message. I'm like, nice. And then you send the whole thing. I'm like, nice.
Yeah. So Southside Rabbi, it's a podcast. It's a video podcast as well, so you can watch it on YouTube. You can get it anywhere you have podcasts as well.
Yeah.
Also, the Bible Project has a YouTube channel, which is really good for the visuals. They also have a podcast as well, and their podcast is has like more snippet versions of some things too. So it's super good. Those are two big resources. Do you guys have any other ones?
I mean, one that comes to mind is, I mean, I guess not really like a resource as far as like a podcast or something, but I mean, Sonic Light, like.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up.
Okay, good. Yeah, like just good, a useful tool for Bible commentary and just understanding the Bible, being able to understand verses and whatnot better in the Bible. I found that it's usually, I mean, I've not really found anything that I disagree with in it, or is bad interpretation. More often than not, I find that he'll stick to the middle, and on an issue where there are many interpretations that kind of don't rely on like the Bible, but rather on extra facts, he'll kind of, and really don't kind of line up with the Bible. He'll just give what we know and stick to that. So
yeah, so online resource Sonic Light. What is it? It is an entire Bible commentary from a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. He's been a professor, I think, for 40 years. He's been a professor at DTS for a bunch of time, and it's a full Bible commentary.
really good.
Super helpful. So
Yes.
So far we got Bible Project, we've got Southside Rabbi, we've got Studying the Bible with Sonic Light. Are there any good meme pages or anything? Like if you guys are looking for stuff or looking for examples of stuff, I know Epic Christian Memes on Instagram. They tend to have some pretty decent memes, at least in the meme world.
I think one that I can't. Honest Youth Pastor sometimes has some pretty good stuff.
Okay. I know there's, if you're looking for...
Recently, but what?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I haven't been on their page recently, but I mean, I know usually whenever I come across it, like it was always pretty good.
Yeah, another good Instagram follow. If you're looking for female voices in the Christian world, which I think it's good to get female, male, people of color, etc. voices. And what's nice about Southside Rabbi is it's two brothers from Florida. It's two Black Americans from Florida. But if you're looking for a resource on Instagram, that can be good. She goes by, or her handle is the Berean Christian. The Berean Christian. She basically, she calls out, or like she does a lot of dealing with stuff that are going on like within the church. So so that can be good as well. I think those are good starting points. There's a whole world of podcasting and podcasts. I'll just name a few here. I'll pull them up here on my phone. Various ones that I listen to, given whatever it is I'm looking for. So Redeeming Truth podcast is pretty good. There's Ask Pastor John, who is John Piper, and he does audio clips, answering questions. Here's the top 4, or the 4 most recent ones. Is my suffering a correction for sin? How do we get tricked into sinning? Why did demons ask Jesus for pigs? Why do I need to read the Bible when we have Bible teachers online? Dismiss the devil with a song, right? Ask Pastor John is super good. There's a podcast called For the Church, which is by Jared C. Wilson. He wrote the book The Imperfect Disciple. That's super good. And he has a podcast called For the Church. There's also Pastors Talk, which is the 9 Marks podcast, which is good, that I also listen to. I'm part of a podcast doing youth stuff. It's a lot more on the silly side of things, but it can be beneficial as well, called the UIC show. Or that's UYC show. I actually help out and do a lot of the graphic design for them. And then the last one that I've been like really encouraged with and really encouraged by, there's a lot of other ones too. I can give you the names of all of them. The Gospel Coalition has a lot, but one that I've been really encouraged by is Happy Rant. And Happy Rant, they seem to strike a pretty good balance of being casual in their conversation and talking about things. So those are all some podcasts. Again, I'm just going to recap. Oh, Kyle, you had something?
Well, I mean, not a bad podcast, but just a good follow is Shylin on Twitter.
Oh, Shylin on Twitter. Great follow.
He has some really good stuff. He'll often post, I mean, for a while he was doing like just a daily proverb.
Right.
He has some really good stuff always.
Yeah, there's so many ways to consume media on the internet. Like...
Yeah. I mean, Gospel Coalition is another thing that comes to mind. Like you just brought it up for the podcast, but that's such a good website for a lot of articles.
Yeah, there's a lot. Let me just kind of recap these. So we've got the Bible Project. Bible Project explains the Bible and explains things in the Bible really well. There's videos and a podcast version of that. You can just Google the Bible Project and you'll find it. You can Google all these and you'll just find it. There's Southside Rabbi, which is a podcast, video form, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Southside Rabbi, super good as well. Then we talked about Sonic Light. Sonic Light being a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary who released for free his whole Bible commentary. When I'm talking like the commentary on the book of Matthew is like 700 pages long. Like, we're talking a huge resource that's very, very good. When you're navigating that, it'll look like you're going to a Plano Bible Chapel or something like that, which is the church that he's affiliated with as well. And then we talked about a bunch of podcasts. I'm not going to recap them. You can go back and listen to the podcast that we were talking about. Some of the good follows to do: the Berean Christian on Instagram, Epic Christian Memes, the Honest Youth Pastor. On Twitter, follow KB. That's just KB. That's also Shai Lin is really good, and a lot of these other good. There's a lot of other good pastors to follow and such. If you're on Facebook and on Twitter as well, Tim Keller, he's been posting some really good one-liners recently, that are really good. and encourage us towards Christ. Again, it's all about setting our sights on Christ and striving hard after Him, even in the internet. So, do you guys have any closing thoughts or anything? I've got a couple of announcements I want to do for those who did stick around with us.
I got nothing.
All right. Well, this has been Waypoint, and one of the things we do at Waypoint is we believe in reaching out to all youth and telling them about Jesus. I forgot to say about our Instagram stuff. Follow us on Instagram, Waypoint SD. Follow us on Facebook. Just look up Waypoint Youth Outreach. You can reach us. All of our handles are actually below me, right here. But we have a form. And what is this form for? This form is we are ordering shirts and swag and all that type of stuff. I'm actually going to put this up here while I talk about it. This year, or what we wanted to do, people were asking us for hoodies. People were asking us for sweaters and pullovers and all sorts of stuff. And I worked with one of our leaders, Jaden Faria. Faria. I have a friend who's Ferreira, and it was like, Jaden Faria, and he designed actually these, and they're super cool. One of the things that we talked about wanting to do was have graphics that look cool that still represent Christ in some way. And when we say look cool, that that aren't some of those like more cheesy Christian shirts, not that those are bad or anything, but something that's a little bit more fashion forward was kind of what we were going with. So as you see here, you guys don't see it, but as we see it for those on Twitch, we went with a Father, Son, Holy Spirit theme. God the Father being described as a lion, the Son being described as a lamb, and the Holy Spirit being described as a dove at various points throughout the Bible. So what we went and did is we created these graphics. We started off with the lion and then made the lamb and the dove. Jaden killed it. He and I worked a little bit together, but he's the one who put in all the work. And we have a big order form. We have a big order form for stuff, and I just linked it here in the Twitch chat. If you want to order shirts and swag, if you want to order hoodies, basically it's all about repping Christ, and it's all about repping God in the world around us. I think it's really powerful to be able to have something that is fashion forward and thought provoking, while still being challenging to the world around us, and something that people might say, "Oh, what's that all about?" Even if it's just a way for us to be more bold in our faith, right? For us to practice having the name Jesus on our shirt, right? I think that those are very powerful things to consider. So, the order form, again, I posted the form in the chat. This is for friends, family, parents, students, like anyone who wants to get some cool stuff. Maybe you aren't a waypointer. Well, guess what? You could still put a lamb on the back of your shirt that says Waypoint, and you can point someone and have a conversation starter, right? Or the back of a hoodie, or on the front you can have a dove, this big dove on your T-shirt that says, that you can talk about, like, oh, what is that? What is that all about? And it's a way to talk to people. I've worn a bunch of Waypoint stuff. I regularly do, and people do ask me about it, and that's kind of been our whole conversation. I remember when one of our other lines that we came out with, we had a skull on a shirt, and it said, "Oh, death, where's your victory? Death, where's your sting?" And people were asking about it. People were like, "What's that all about?" And it was super, super cool to see people responding to that. So I encourage you. I encourage you guys. You know, my brothers in chat or whatever. Like, if you want to pick up something, just fill out the form and then we'll figure out how to get it all done. So, I think it's sweet, and it'll be really cool. So,
Did you post the form?
what'd you say?
Did you post how to get to the form?
How to get to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a link.
Okay. I don't have
so
the
there's
chat.
a link. There's a link in the stream chat. Kyle just doesn't listen to me. That's the answer. There's a link in the stream chat. There's also a link in the Discord for the students, and there's a link in the Discord for the students. I'll be pushing out this kind of all over the place. If you guys are wanting to get some cool Jesus swag, representing our God, this is good stuff. So we love and we want to represent Christ everywhere. We want to represent the love of Christ everywhere, and God the Father, and how we live filled by the Holy Spirit. So that includes the internet. That includes the internet for all of us. So guys, I think today was a really cool conversation. I think it's good to think about how people engage with the internet and how we can be better about thinking about the things we post about and who this might reach and how this preaches the gospel and how this loves people. You know, we want to be careful about not just speaking truth, but speaking truth in love. And we want to be challenged. We want to be a people who are challenged to do that well. And the internet is a place to do that well. Any closing thoughts, guys?
No.
Yeah? You guys ready for some Saturday naps? Because I know I am.
I'm gonna go get donuts, actually.
What? You know where my address is. Hook it up, brother.
We'll see.
This guy's not coming over.
I don't know if donuts feeds 2 people, but
A dozen donuts feed 2 people?
I don't know if that's the thing.
Oh my goodness. Maybe we could break them in half and feed some massives or something like that. You know,
We could try.
we'll see.
I am a man.
All right, gentlemen, it's a blessing. Thanks for coming on and talking. It was super cool, and we will catch you all next time on Waypoint Coffee Corner. See you guys.